The interview was going smoothly until the producer slid a single photograph across the table. Priscilla Presley's face went pale. Her hands trembled as she picked up the image, studying it with an intensity that made everyone in the room fall silent. Then came the words that would ignite a firestorm across the internet. "That's not my Elvis." But here's what nobody's talking about. The photo wasn't from 1977. It was taken in 1981. 4 years after the king supposedly died. What Priscilla saw in that picture has left experts divided, fans questioning everything, and the Presley estate scrambling for answers. The truth behind this photograph might rewrite rock and roll history. The Memphis television studio felt like any other that autumn morning. Priscilla Presley had agreed to a rare interview commemorating what would have been Elvis's 90th birthday. She'd done hundreds of these over the decades, gracious, poised, sharing carefully curated memories of the man who'd changed music forever. The questions were predictable: their early romance, life at Graceland, his generosity, his talent. She answered each with practiced elegance, her voice steady, her smile warm but measured. Then came the moment that nobody anticipated. Veteran music journalist Robert Hammond, who'd spent 40 years covering the Presley legacy, produced a manila envelope from his briefcase. "Mrs. Presley," he said carefully, "I need to show you something that recently surfaced from a private collection. The owner wishes to remain anonymous, but they claim this photograph was taken in Michigan in 1981. The date alone should have raised eyebrows. Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977 at Graceland. The entire world mourned. Over 75,000 fans filed past his casket. The funeral was broadcast internationally. His death certificate, autopsy report, and grave at Graceland's meditation garden are all matters of public record. Yet here was a photograph allegedly taken 4 years later. Priscilla's expression shifted the moment her eyes met the image. Those watching the interview live noticed it immediately. The color drained from her cheeks, her breathing became shallow, and her hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, suddenly gripped the armrests of her chair. She picked up the photograph with trembling fingers, bringing it closer to her face, then holding it at arm's length as if distance might change what she was seeing. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the studio's ambient hum. Hammond explained that an estate sale in Kalamazoo had yielded several boxes of photographs belonging to a deceased former motel owner. Among hundreds of mundane images, tourists, landscapes, local events, was this one photograph. The man in the picture stood beside a vintage car, wearing aviator sunglasses, a casual jacket, and a hat pulled low. But it was the posture, the build, the unmistakable curve of the lip that made people look twice. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media. Priscilla set down the photograph, removed her microphone, and stood abruptly. "That's not my Elvis," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. But she didn't say it wasn't Elvis. She said it wasn't her Elvis. The distinction would fuel endless speculation. The image that shattered Priscilla's composure didn't emerge through traditional channels. It wasn't discovered by a historian, authenticated by an archivist, or presented by the Presley estate. Instead, it followed the chaotic, unpredictable path of 21st century information, from a dusty box in a Michigan basement to the screens of millions worldwide in less than 72 hours. Margaret Chen, a 34-year-old antique dealer from Ann Arbor, purchased the contents of the Kalamazoo estate sale for $1,200. She was hunting for vintage furniture and retro decor to stock her shop, not historical artifacts. The 3 boxes of photographs seemed like an afterthought, potential material for craft projects or shabby chic picture frames. She almost threw them away, but Margaret had a habit of scrolling through old photos before discarding them, respecting the lives they represented. Most showed exactly what you'd expect: vacations at Niagara Falls, children's birthday parties, a golden retriever in various seasons. Then she found the one that made her stop. The man in the photograph stood with confidence, one hand resting on a 1978 Cadillac Seville, the other holding what appeared to be a newspaper. The setting was mundane, a motel parking lot, probably somewhere in the Midwest, based on the flat landscape and architectural style. Margaret's first instinct wasn't "that's Elvis Presley." It was, "that guy looks like Elvis Presley." She posted it to a vintage photography forum with the caption, "Found this in an estate sale. Cool Elvis impersonator from the early 80s?" The forum's members, amateur photography enthusiasts, and nostalgia collectors began analyzing the image immediately. Within hours, someone noted the newspaper in the man's hand appeared to show a headline from November 1981. Another member, a former professional photographer, pointed out that the image quality, grain structure, and color saturation were consistent with Kodak film stock from that era, not a modern reproduction. The discussion might have remained confined to that small forum, but a member shared it to a Facebook group dedicated to Elvis sightings and conspiracy theories. From there, it exploded. Within 24 hours, the photograph had been shared across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Reddit. Experts weighed in. Debunkers emerged. Believers rallied. The image was analyzed, enhanced, compared against thousands of known Elvis photographs. Some declared it obvious proof the king had faked his death. Others dismissed it as a remarkably good impersonator or a clever modern fake. That's when Robert Hammond saw it. A serious journalist with credentials spanning 4 decades, Hammond had interviewed Elvis twice before his death and had maintained relationships with people in the Presley orbit. He'd seen countless fake Elvis photos over the years, blurry gas station snapshots, photoshopped composites, earnest but mistaken sightings of tribute artists. This one was different. Something about the posture, the specific way the man held his weight, the proportion of the features visible beneath the sunglasses and hat. It warranted serious investigation. Hammond tracked down Margaret Chen, verified the photograph's chain of custody, and contacted forensic imaging specialists. The results were inconclusive but intriguing. The photo hadn't been digitally manipulated. It was genuinely from the 1980s era. The film, paper, and chemical processing all matched the supposed time period. But was it Elvis? That remained the million-dollar question. Hammond decided the only way to get closer to the truth was to confront someone who'd known Elvis intimately. He reached out to Priscilla's representatives and proposed the interview segment. When the photograph went viral, armchair detectives weren't the only ones taking notice. Forensic experts, biometric analysts, and artificial intelligence specialists saw an opportunity to apply cutting-edge technology to one of pop culture's most enduring mysteries. What they discovered didn't provide definitive answers, but it raised questions that neither believers nor skeptics could easily dismiss. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, a forensic anthropologist at Northwestern University who specializes in facial recognition and age progression, was among the first credentialed experts to examine the image. Using software typically employed by law enforcement to identify suspects from partial or obscured photographs, she analyzed the visible portions of the man's face. "We're working with limited data," she explained in a YouTube video that garnered 3 million views. "The sunglasses obscure the eyes, the hat shadows the forehead, and the angle isn't ideal. But we can measure specific landmarks, the distance between the nose and upper lip, the jawline structure, the ear shape." Her findings were cautiously worded but provocative. The measurements she could obtain showed significant correspondence with known Elvis photographs within the margin of variation you'd expect from different angles and 4 additional years of aging. However, she emphasized that without clear images of the eyes and with such limited visible area, definitive identification remained impossible. Could this be Elvis Presley at age 46? Yes, it's consistent with that possibility. Could it also be someone with similar facial structure? Absolutely. We need more data points for certainty. Meanwhile, AI-driven age progression specialists took a different approach. They fed neural networks thousands of Elvis photographs from throughout his life, teaching the algorithms to predict how his appearance might have evolved past 1977. The AI-generated images of a 46-year-old Elvis bore a striking resemblance to the Michigan photograph. Similar weight distribution, the same recession pattern in the visible hairline beneath the hat, comparable facial proportions accounting for 4 additional years of aging and potential lifestyle changes. But technology could only take the investigation so far. Dr. Marcus Webb, a handwriting and document authentication expert, examined the newspaper visible in the photograph. By enhancing the image and cross-referencing with newspaper archives, he identified it as likely being the Detroit Free Press from November 7, 1981. The headline, though partially obscured, appeared to reference a local political story from that specific date. If this is a hoax, Webb noted, it's extraordinarily elaborate. The perpetrator would need access to authentic 1981 newspapers, period-accurate film stock, and either an Elvis impersonator of remarkable similarity or sophisticated photo manipulation techniques that frankly didn't exist in that era. The medical community weighed in as well, focusing on Elvis's well-documented health problems in his final years. Dr. Jennifer Patel, a cardiologist who'd studied the Presley autopsy reports, pointed out that Elvis's severe health issues, cardiovascular disease, colon problems, liver damage, chronic pain, made survival past 1977 highly improbable without extensive medical intervention. If he did somehow survive and was living covertly, he would have needed regular access to health care, prescription medications, and likely surgical procedures. That leaves traces, medical records, pharmacy records. Someone would have had to be complicit. Yet the counter-argument persisted. What if that was exactly the point? What if a small network of trusted individuals, a private doctor, a loyal friend, perhaps even a family member, had helped facilitate a disappearance? The king of rock and roll had the resources, the motivation given the pressures of fame, and certainly the global recognition that made normal life impossible. Could the photograph represent not a hoax, but evidence of the most successful celebrity disappearance in history? To understand why Priscilla's reaction carried such weight, you need to understand her unique position in the Elvis mythology. She wasn't just his ex-wife or the mother of his only child. She was the keeper of the flame, the primary guardian of his legacy, and someone who'd spent nearly 50 years carefully managing the public memory of the king. Priscilla met Elvis when she was just 14 years old, the daughter of an Air Force officer stationed in Germany where Elvis was serving. Their relationship, which began when he was 24 and already a global superstar, would be controversial by today's standards. But it was the foundation of the most significant romantic partnership in Elvis's life. They married in 1967, had daughter Lisa Marie in 1968, and divorced in 1973, remaining close friends until his death 4 years later. After Elvis died, Priscilla transformed herself from grieving ex-wife into savvy businesswoman. She took control of the Graceland estate when it was hemorrhaging money, and turned it into one of America's most successful historic home attractions, generating over $10 million annually. She executive produced television movies about Elvis, consulted on biographical projects, and carefully stewarded his image through decades of changing cultural attitudes. She dated other men, pursued an acting career, and built her own identity, but Elvis remained central to her public persona and private life. Given this history, her reaction to the Michigan photograph carried enormous significance. This wasn't a random celebrity offering an opinion. This was someone who'd known Elvis's body, mannerisms, and essence more intimately than almost anyone alive. When she said, "That's not my Elvis," people listened, but they also parsed every syllable for hidden meaning. The phrase itself became the subject of intense speculation. Did she mean the photograph didn't show Elvis at all, but rather an impersonator? Or did she mean that if it was somehow Elvis, he'd become someone unrecognizable, transformed by time and circumstance into a stranger? Some interpreted her words as denial, an instinctive rejection of the impossible. Others heard confirmation, as if she was saying, "If Elvis did survive, the man in this photograph has become someone I no longer know." What happened immediately after the interview provided further fuel for speculation. Priscilla left the studio without completing the scheduled segments. Her representatives released a brief statement saying she was emotionally overwhelmed by unexpected content and needed privacy. She didn't appear publicly for 3 weeks, an unusual absence for someone typically accessible and professional. When she finally did speak, through a carefully worded Instagram post, she addressed the incident obliquely. Elvis Presley died in 1977. The grief, the mystery, and the memories belong to all of us now. I ask for respect during this difficult time. The statement satisfied no one. Skeptics saw it as a definitive refutation. Elvis was dead, period. Believers interpreted it differently. She'd said he died in 1977, but said nothing about whether he'd stayed dead, whether the death was faked, or whether the photograph showed something impossible yet real. The ambiguity seemed calculated, as if she was threading a needle between legal liability, personal truth, and public perception. Internet sleuths began examining Priscilla's entire history for clues. A 1996 interview where she'd seemed to hesitate when asked if she'd ever questioned the circumstances of Elvis's death. A 2008 appearance where she'd mentioned feeling his presence in ways that seemed to suggest more than spiritual metaphor. Cryptic social media posts that, when scrutinized through the lens of conspiracy, might contain hidden messages. It was the modern equivalent of playing Beatles records backwards, searching for Paul McCartney death clues, pattern recognition run amok, but compelling in its obsessive detail. The Michigan photograph remains unexplained. Forensic analysis proves it's authentically from the 1980s, but can't definitively identify the man in the image. Priscilla hasn't elaborated beyond her initial reaction. The Presley estate maintains that Elvis died in 1977, full stop. Yet the questions persist, the debates continue, and the photograph has reignited a cultural conversation about celebrity, death, and the stories we tell ourselves about our heroes. What do you think? Is the Michigan photograph evidence of the impossible, or just another case of mistaken identity? Share your theory in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries that keep us guessing.